Hello, everyone. This is Greg Childers. We are expecting quite a few attendees today. We're going to give just a few more minutes for everyone to make it into the meeting window. We will probably start in the next 5 minutes. All right, so the next 5 minutes. We're just giving everyone a chance to get joined into the meeting. Hello, everyone. This is Greg Childers, just making the announcement. We are waiting for a few more attendees to join us. We will begin in approximately 2 minutes. We will start at 20 minutes till the top of the hour. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Devo. This is our third in a series of Devo deep dives. This one is on exciting data enrichment experiences. We will be covering topics such as lookup tables, creating lookups from a query, adding lookup values to your query, and also managing and editing lookup tables. My name is Greg Childers. I'm a technical trainer here at Devo. In attendance with me is several other of my colleagues, including fellow technical trainer, Tim Ramsey. We will be handling the presentation today, and if you have any questions during the day, please use the Q&A feature in the meeting platform window, and that way we will be able to have those questions answered in a timely manner. We also have another session next week. All right, so if you're interested in signing up for that, please do so at your earliest convenience. I know that some of you may have been in attendance in the previous ones, and we welcome you back. Some of you may be here for the first time, and we welcome you to the presentation as well. All right, but without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. All right, so today's Devo Deep Dive presentation is, as I said before, about data enrichment. And in this, we will be discussing various topics, including lookup files, lookup tables, lookup files management, how to make the correlations, and we will also give you some additional information at the end of the presentation. All right, the first topic we will discuss are lookup files. All right, what is a lookup file? Well, a lookup file is an external file that you can use to add external data to an existing query that you've run. You know, you may have, say, for example, some data that came from your web server, and it's got IP address information from the people who are visiting your website. And you want to correlate that with additional data that may be available about those users, right? But you don't have it in the same log file that's in your query, right? You have it in an external file. Well, it can be used to help enrich your data, right? Now, during the course of this presentation, we will show you how to enrich your data using the additional lookup file. All right, the actual enrichment is going to be done at the time of the query. All right, when you run the query, your initial query, what it will allow you to do is you will be able to choose the tags for the data table that you want to view. You will be able to filter it. You will be able to group it. You will be able to do aggregations. But if you want to enrich the data that's there, you will do it after you've run your initial query. And the original data tables are not going to be altered in any way. What it's going to do is it's going to allow you to use this external data and then create a correlation with the data that's already there. And again, we'll go through some demonstrations to show you how to do this. These separate lookup files contain additional information that's not currently present in your initial query data, all right? Because we are adding this additional data to our query, it allows us to have a better understanding of the information that we're looking at. You know, just looking at raw IP addresses can only tell you so much. We have some operators that will allow us to do certain things like geolocation, but let's say, for example, we were looking at firewall traffic within an organization. We wanted to see, you know, the inter-office traffic inside of the network. We have information that's related to the devices inside of our network. You know, we can capture internal IP addresses, MAC addresses. We can also capture things like, you know, which employee is that device assigned to? You know, what's their job title? You know, and various other things. And we can use that data to give us a bigger picture of what's going on, all right, than just the initial data itself. These files are going to be in a CSV format, and this is going to be great because this is an easily parsed format that can be used and easily linked to our initial data table. In the lookup file, we need to have at least one field, which will be the field we use to correlate the data, and that field is called the key field. All right. In the examples that I've used previously, a good example might be IP address, because an IP address is something that's going to be assigned to one device only. I can take the IP address information in, say, a firewall log or a web server log, and then correlate it to an external file in a CSV that has those same IP addresses, and pull additional information into my query. And we'll show you how to do all of these in just a moment. Now, the lookup files themselves, like I said, they show up in a CSV file. And we've got an example here in the slide. We've got a table that's got the IP addresses, it's got the street addresses, it's got the building address, it's got the floor, the office, the brand, and the model, all right, of different devices. The file format for CSV, as we all know, it's comma delimited, all right? So it's able to easily parse the fields and create what's called a lookup table. In that lookup file, one field has to be that particular lookup key field, all right? And as I said before, IP address is probably the best candidate because it's a unique value. You know, we're going to have one IP address assigned per device. Obviously, in this example, they've got street address. Well, those appear to be unique. Building is definitely not. Floor is definitely not. And I can't assume the others will be as well. This is probably just a subset of the file. All right, so what we want to do is show you how to upload the lookup files. All right, now, typically the way that you do this is you would go to your data search area. And from here, you would go to the area called Lookup Management. And in Lookup Management, you could upload the file. All right, there's a button in the upper right-hand corner called New Lookup. And when you click that New Lookup button, it allows you to upload a file. Now, when you create that new lookup, it will ask you for specific information. It will ask you for the name of the file. It will actually ask you to upload the file. And when you upload the file, then it will pull into this window the name of all the fields if those fields are present in the CSV file, right? They also have to be assigned a data type, right? So in this example, you can see there's an IP address, you know, and various other pieces of data in the slide. Let me show you an actual example of uploading a lookup file. Give me just one moment while I switch the presentation around. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay, I'm going to log in, and I'll use our Devo 101 training domain. All right, I've been told you can't see my screen. Hold on. Looks like we've got some technical difficulties going on in the background, but it should be showing my master screen. Okay, I've gotten an indication from one of the participants that they can see the screen. Cool. All right, so I'm going to log in, and I'm going to go to my data search area and to Lookup Management. Now, here are a list of some of the lookup files that have already been uploaded by me as well as several others, right? I've even got some uploaded myself from previous webinars we've done. To do the loading of the new lookup file, you would click New Lookup, and it would pull up the New Lookup window. And I'm going to type in a name for it. I'll just do Greg underscore IP example. I'm going to browse for this file. Got a CSV loaded on my desktop. And as soon as it loads, immediately it gives me the option, does it contain headers? All right, which it's got a little checkbox there. All right, it's already checked because the file did in fact have headers at the top of the file. It's got the column names of IP address, name, surname, office, floor, hired date, and job title. It also has the format of each of these different types of data. All right. Now, one of them has to be the key field. It has automatically picked the IP address, which it has recognized as an IP version 4 address. And I won't have to make any changes. I can simply click Create Lookup, and then it gives me a notification in the upper right-hand corner of the screen that a lookup table is being created. You will be notified when the process is complete. Now, just because we were doing this deep dive, I have preloaded some other lookup tables already so that they can be done and out of the way, because you do have to wait for it to upload the file. Right now, if I scroll through the list, I can see there's several shared, there's several private. Let me refresh my screen. Give it just a moment. And I'll go back to Lookup Management. And I can see it's creating that example, right? Now, I didn't want you to have to wait for it to create that lookup list in Lookup Management. That's why I've got several preloaded that we can use for the rest of the demonstration. But literally, that's all there is to creating the lookup list. Managing them is also done here, right? So, for example, let's say that you've created a lookup of your own. I've got a few in here already. Let's see. Here's one that I created previously. It's called Greg IP List that I created a while back. This one I've also got shared. You can take all of your different lookup lists, and there's an ellipse button at the end of the row. You can download the CSV if you'd like to just have it in a separate file. Maybe you've deleted the original file and you need to download it again. You can edit it. All right, that's actually an option. You can upload a new version if you have updated or additional information that you want to add to that lookup list. You can see restrictions on the file. You can share the file with other job roles. All right, now that's pretty important. If you want others to be able to use your lookup list to enrich data in their queries, you will have to share the data with those other job roles. And of course, there's the option to delete, which will do exactly as it states. It will delete it. I'm leaving that alone because I need to keep that there for an example. All right, so I will go back to my slide deck. So let's see here. Give it just a moment. All right. Now, once you've uploaded the CSV file, again, you just make sure that all the field names are correct. Make sure that the data types are correct. Make sure that the key field is correct. And then just create that lookup list. All right. Now, the next topic we've got is going to be the lookup tables themselves. I'm not sure why this is spinning on me. All right, again, If you need to find these lookup lists, there are two places you can find them. You can find them under Lookup Management, and you will see, like I said before, the complete list of all the lookups that are available to you. A second place you can find them is underneath the first tab, Explore Your Data. All right, this is the tab where you would create your initial query. The place where you would find them would be under the tags of my dot lookup list. All right, so it would be my for the first tag, lookup list for the second tag. And then for the type, you could just scroll through the list until you found your lookup list, and it will be in there. If you select all the tags for your lookup list, my.lookuplist. Whatever you named it, it will then run a query where the result virtual data table will be your lookup table, and you'll get to see the actual data in it. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about doing the correlation, actually linking our data in the lookup list to our initial query. And as I said before, you've got to have some type of key field that links the two together. It's important that you know the data that's located in your query and also in your lookup list. If you try to do a correlation, first it has to have a matching field, but it also has to have matching values in those fields. If there's, say, for example, using the one that we're using here, if there's an IP address that's in the data query, but it's not in the CSV file that we uploaded, it's not going to be able to do a correlation and add the additional data fields to those records, right? And by the same token, if there's some IP addresses that are in the lookup file that we've uploaded, but they're not present in the initial data query, obviously that data won't be pulled into our new query either, right? So it's not a bad idea to periodically go back to exploring your data, looking at my lookup list, whatever your lookup list name is, and just peruse the data and see what's there. If there's a particular IP address range, then you need to make sure that it's going to match some of the records in your initial query. Now, as I said before, lookup management, you can do quite a lot of things here. You can obviously see the list of all the different lookups that are available, but you can also do much more with that. All right, so you would go to data search in the navigation panel, and you would go to lookup management, and you would see the complete list of lookups. You would find yours in the list, and again, there's an ellipse button on the far right-hand side of that row. When you click on it, it will give you several options of things that you can do with it. All right, you can download it as a CSV. You can add restrictions to tables. You can share it with others. And when you share it with others, you can specify a specific role. All right, whether it be sharing it with other users, sharing it with people in other departments, sharing it with people in different geographic regions. It just depends upon how your roles are distributed within your organization. And there's obviously also the option to delete your lookup. Now, I want to be very clear on this because I don't want anyone to make this mistake. All right, there is a warning that will be present, and there's a reason for it. If you delete your lookup file, all right, any queries that you created that were using the data in that lookup file will no longer work. Any aggregation tasks that you performed on your queries that were using lookup data will no longer work. Any reinjections you've done using data from this lookup file will no longer work. Any alerts you have set up using data from this external file will no longer work. You could potentially break quite a few things. So if you are going to delete it, make sure that you don't have anything else that will fail as a result of you deleting it. All right, so that may require some background work on your part to go through and clean up other areas inside the platform. All right, because once it's gone, and the only way to get it back is to upload the file all over again. Now, the next part we have is making the actual correlations. Once you have the file uploaded, and I'm looking at mine in the background. Let me refresh my screen in the background. You won't see me do this, but I'm just pulling it up on my second monitor so I can take a peek at it. It looks like it is still creating it, so it's a good thing that I created that previous lookup list so I can use it as an example in just a moment. But this is how you would do it. You would add additional columns to your pre-existing query. So let's say you ran a query about firewall data, and you see, the source IP address, you see the destination IP address, you see different port numbers, you see different MAC addresses present, and it's great information, but you want to get a little bit more context behind what's going on. You've got an external file that you want to upload, which you've already uploaded, your lookup file, and it contains information about some of those specific IP addresses. All right, maybe usernames or some additional information. All right, the way to do that is you would go to your data search and you would open your corresponding data table, create your initial query, pick the tags that are necessary to get that data table up there. Once you've done that, you would click the Create Column button in the Operations toolbar in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. All right, when you create the column, it will have your Create Column box will pop up. You will select Custom and look for the name of the lookup file. You can then select the column you want to add, right? And give that column that you're adding a meaningful name, something that will help you remember exactly what data you're adding to this initial data query. All right, you'll add the column for the correlation with the key field as an argument. All right, and then you'll click the Create Column button. All right, so let me go through this process and do it for you. Let me switch back over to my data search area, and I will share my screen again. Okay, should take just a moment, but it should be popping up. All right, so here I am in my data search area, and I'm in Explore Your Data. And I'm going to look up my initial data search. So I'm going to take a table. Let's see, I said firewall data, so might as well use that as an example, firewall. And just for the heck of it, let's see what we've got here. We've got all Cisco, Fortinet, Juniper, Palo Alto, and Sophos. I think for this example, what I'll do is I'll just use a Cisco brand and ASA type. Give it just a moment to load the screen. All right, there we go. It'll be up there in just a moment. Now, what this will do is it will have all the data that I need. All right, awesome. And I can see the event date field, which machine. There's an event date, there's actions, directions. Some of these fields have a lot of null values, protocols. Here's a source IP field, a port, a source MAC. If I keep scrolling to the right, I can see additional information. Let's see, there's a destination IP address. Looks like they've got quite a lot of stuff going on here. Oh, it looks like it finally created my lookup list. So what I would do is I would create an additional column. All right, and I want to add in some information like source underscore username. Now, the operation that I'm going to choose, I'll just use all for the operation. And I'm going to click on this box, and I'm going to type in is in so that it will search for me. Whoops. Let me do the case sensitivity of all. Is in. And I'm looking for the operation is in IP version 6 in a network CIDR notation. Now I have to add some arguments to this. All right, the first argument that I'm going to add is going to be the key field. All right, what I'm correlating the key field to, and in this case, it's going to be the source IP address. The second argument I'm going to add is I have to apply sort of a range for it. it's looking for a range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the edit button, and I'm just going to type in 172.0.0.0/11. So it's going to do internal addresses in the 172 range. All right, so actually, let me back up a second. I'm going to do this even better. I'm going to apply a filter first and just filter out all the results that don't match what I'm looking for. Let me just do that first. That would be a lot easier. Is in. That'll make it way easier. All right, so I'll do the source IP address. And I'll say that these all have to be in the 172.0.0.0/11 range. All right, once I apply the filter, I can see all my source IP addresses are now in that range. I'm going to do the same for the destination IP address. All right, so I'm going to apply the filter one more time. Is in. Add in the argument of the destination IP address. And the destination IP address I'll also say is 172.0.0.0/11. The reason I'm applying these filters is because the lookup file that I've uploaded, it's a pretty small file, and all the addresses are in the 172 range. So if I just made the correlation without doing the filter, I would have a lot of null values because there's a lot of IP addresses in this list that don't fit within that range. All right, I just want to know the internal traffic. Who's the source? Who's the destination? All right, so now that I've filtered it down to just IP addresses in that range, now I'll add the column. All right, so I'm going to add in the column source username. And the source username, I'm actually going to use my lookup list. Now, you can do custom operations. If you do custom operations, what it will do is it will take you to the available lookup list. I can see one here that's called to what. Not sure exactly what that's for, but there's one created that's been uploaded, and it's called to what. There's another one that has a pair of initials and apparently a date and time stamp. And if I scroll through them, I can see all these different lookup lists. That's what these headers are. Those are the names of the lookup list files. Below them, in the group, it shows the different fields in those lookup files that can be used. So I can correlate it to pretty much anything. Now, I named mine Greg. So I'm just going to type in Greg, and it immediately hops to that lookup file in the list, and right below it is the one that I did previously. I'm going to find out the name and surname of the individual in that lookup list using the argument of the client IP address or the source IP address. And I'm going to create that column. Now, I could have chosen for operation, I could have chosen all. Standard are the standard operators. Custom are the custom operators that are created when you upload a lookup file. All is everything. It basically bundles everything from standard and custom into one big package so that you can have everything all at once. If I'm trying to do a correlation with a operator, I'll use standard. If I'm doing it with a lookup list, I'll do custom, or I can just leave it on all, and I know that they're all going to be there. All right, so give me the name or surname from the file using the source IP address as the thing to link the two together. And I create the column, give it just a moment, and the very last column in the table, I scroll all the way over to the right, will be the username from the source IP address. Right? And I can continue to do this. I can add another column and say I want source underscore title. And I'm just going to find my list again and say that I want to grab the job title, adding in the argument of the source IP address, and I'll create that column. So now I have not only their name, add their job title as well. I can find out that for all of the internal packets that went through the firewall. If I scroll to the right, I can see those different pieces of information. We've got JC Matthews, a developer, Wyatt Price, a technical support engineer, and so on and so forth. Now, I can also do it for the destination IP address. So I can create a column, and I'll just call this one DEST underscore username. And for this, I will again type in my name so it jumps to my lookup file. And I'm going to grab name, surname again. But this time when I add the argument, I'm going to link it to the destination IP address, not the source IP address. And I click create column. All right, so I'm going to scroll all the way to the right. And now I can see the source username and the destination username. Might as well add in the destination job title while I'm at it. All right, so I'm going to create one more column. Whoops, hit the wrong button. One more column. And this one will be destination title. Again, I'm going to type in my name so it goes to my lookup file. And I'm going to choose job title. And for the argument, I'm going to add in, it's going to be the destination IP address. Go ahead and create the column. And now I can see all four columns that I've added. The username of the source and their job title, the destination username and their job title. And that file has additional information in it. You know, if I go back to data search and go to my lookup list, then scroll through all the lookup lists that are in there and find mine, this is the list. I mean, this is it in its entirety. It's got the event date, it's got all the IP addresses, the names, the office they're in, the floor they're on, their hire date, and their job title. So I could add that additional data to my initial query quite easily. All right, quite easily. All right, it just depends upon what you have in the file. And you can create a CSV file rather easily. You know, you could import the data into Excel. Excel's probably the easiest way to do it. And then just save the file as a CSV file. And then you upload the CSV file back at data search to lookup management. All right, just create new lookup, browse for your file. When you find your file, you open it. All right, obviously you need to give it a name. I, for demonstration purposes, usually will use my name because it's easier to find them. If I use my name, if I give it some other name, I might forget what I named it. But just give it a meaningful name that you'll know what it is when you're looking for it. And all of the column headers in that CSV file will appear right here. And those will be the column names that it assigns to that lookup table. All right, and it shows the format and it shows the key. All right, once you've created it, it takes a while for it to completely create. But once its status in the lookup management window is set to available, then you can create those correlations. Not until then, but you can do it up until that point. Now, the one that I've been using is Greg IP List, which I uploaded some time before. And if I click on the drop-down arrow, it actually gives me a brief summary of the different fields that are in that lookup list. It's got the office, which is a string of text, the floor, which is a string of text, the name, surname, which is a string of text, the IP address, which is an IP version 4 address, and I can see a little symbol showing me that it's the key field. All right, I've got the job title, which is a string, and the hire date, which is a string. And again, at the far right-hand side, there's an ellipse button, which are more options. I can download the CSV if I need to get a hard copy of it, if the original is gone or corrupted. I can edit it if I need to, which will take me to this screen. I can add in rows if necessary. All right, whoops, didn't mean to do that one. All right, but I'll put one in, 172.16 15 dot, let's see, 4.99, just for the heck of it. I'll put in my own name, country, floor, hire date, and my job title. And you can edit the data directly because that data is actually residing in the lookup management area. You can make the changes necessary here. And then click Save Changes when you're done editing. Say, for example, one of these people leaves and a new person is assigned to that job role and that IP address. You just go in and edit the name, click Save Changes. All right, that's definitely an option. Now, in addition to doing that, you can see now it's updating because I made a change to it. But in addition to updating it, I'll just grab another example for this one. I can upload a new version, which simply would be browsing for a new version of the file, uploading it. It's going to keep the same name and just basically right on top of the old one. Let's see, other options. Going in, we mentioned the restrictions. All right, we can see if there are any restrictions to the tables. Don't appear to be. Let me go back. All right, I can share it. And when I share it, I can pick any one of the existing roles. Now, administrators have access to it because, well, administrators need access to everything, quite honestly. And there's these little screen tips that appear, and you can click on them and you can see additional information like this role has permission to manage all resources, right, which it has on both sides for the administrator, obviously. If I wanted to share this one with others, I would have to check the box next to their role. So, for example, if someone was logged into this domain in a training role, I'd have to check the box for them to view to be able to view it. If I wanted them to be able to make changes to it, I'd have to check edit, all right, as well, all right, so that they could do that. And then I would click apply. I've already done that with one, so I don't have to share this one, but yeah, there's that one at the top that's been shared. All right, and I can refresh it if necessary. Now, going back, the last option we've got in the list is delete. And again, when you delete it, you will get that warning. Because again, once it's gone, and there's no way to get it back, right, other than to upload a version of the file again. And that means you're going to have to rebuild it all from scratch, and you're possibly could break some things that are dependent upon that lookup list. All right, so again, be very careful with deleting lookups. Don't delete ones that have been shared with you by others because they may be using it. That's one thing to really look at. If it's been shared, you really want to think twice about deleting it because it could potentially have a cascade effect that you did not intend. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. Now, again, when you make those correlations, it's pretty easy to search for your lookup file in the list. When you add the column, you would use the custom operations. You could type in the name, the first few letters of the name of your lookup list, and it will pull it up. And below that group header, you will see all the different fields in that lookup table. You will have to pick one of them. That's going to be the data you're actually adding to your query. You will have to add in the argument, which matches the key field. So if the IP address was the key field, the argument you add must be an IP field from the original query that you ran. Whether it's a source IP address, destination IP address, it's got to be a field from your original query that's an IP address. Without that, you're not going to be able to do it. All right, so quick review. You would create your column. You would scroll through the list of custom operations until you found first your lookup list and second the field you want to add. Then you would add in the argument that linked to that key field. And in the case of IP address, you might have to add a second argument. Then it will show those additional columns with whatever name you gave them in with your original query. And that will add more context to the data, by allowing you to pull that external data into the file. Now, for this part of the presentation, we are going to take a short 5-minute break. When we return, we are going to discuss the topics of static lookups and dynamic lookups. All right, so we're going to take a short 5-minute break. It's 20 past the hour. We'll come back at 25 past the hour, and we will continue from there. All right, enjoy your 5-minute break. We will return with more on lookup tables. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. For the next portion of our Devo Deep Dive, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Tim Ramsey, fellow technical trainer and guru extraordinaire. Tim, please take it away.
Oh, well, no pressure there. Thank you, Greg. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the options that you have with lookup files and lookup tables. File being a comma separated value list, table being what the platform is actually processing. The most direct and I suppose simple case of a lookup table is generated from a file, comma separated value list of key and other data rows that you have uploaded for ingestion into the platform, and then you can reference this resulting lookup table in your queries. But there are a couple of other options, and what these other options are mostly useful for is the platform currently has a limitation. I know I'm shocked as well. And the limitation is that it can only query one table at a time. And this limitation is actually in the web user interface. It's not present when you use, for example, the Query API. The Query API allows you to do subqueries where you can, on the fly, correlate the data being returned by one table against the data present in another table and pull additional data out of the second table and include that in the query results. So subqueries are something that do allow you to query multiple tables, but that is not yet implemented through the web user interface. Coming, but not here. And it is a fairly common situation where I actually want my query result to have some data from table A, but other data from table B. So what I'm talking about is each row of returned data will have some columns contributed from table A and other columns contributed from table B, all mixed in the same row, all present in the same row, in the row upon row upon row upon row of return query results. So some use cases here are perhaps I have data being ingested from my firewalls, and I have data being ingested from my web server, www.company.com. I would like to be able to correlate what the firewall sees and what the web server sees. I mean, nowadays, pretty much every firewall can do layer 7, and it can understand the details of an HTTP transaction, for instance. And so it depends on the firewall, but a lot of firewall tables do have information about, say, what URL was requested. But the web server is the subject matter expert, and so it may have columns, for instance, internal information about if I'm returning an error response code, give me additional information about why I'm returning that error response code. The firewall will only see the error response code of 400 something, for instance. And in my query, I want to see what the firewall is returning. This connection was accepted. This connection came from this source and was going to this destination, that sort of thing. But I also, for connections to my web server, I want additional insight from what the web server logs have ingested into the platform. And again, through the web user interface, can't really do that right now. But there are workarounds. And one workaround is to make use of this lookup table facility that the platform provides, because that's already getting me most of the way. A lookup table allows me to add additional columns of data from this lookup something that I'm accessing to the query results against, say, a firewall. My query is against the firewall table, but in the query, I'm saying I want you to find the rows or the row in this lookup table that matches whatever it is I'm matching on in my firewall query results, and return this column and this column and this column from the data in the lookup table. So the term I use for that is enrichment. Enrichment being adding new data to a query result that wasn't there in the original table that I'm querying. The new data, which is in the additional columns, is coming from some second source. And it doesn't have to be just a second source. It could be a third source, fourth source, etc. So lookup tables already provide a way that I can enrich the query output that I'm getting from whatever it is that I'm querying with new data, additional data from some second or nth source. But the problem with lookup tables so far is that they're static. I mean, it's a comma separated value that I uploaded. So with a web server log, for instance, that's probably not going to be very useful because my web server log is, of course, fairly dynamic. Now, if it is static data, like the example I usually use is I have internal non-routable private IP addresses in use within my organization. And Greg's example is this as well. I would like to enrich my, say, firewall query with geolocation data for these private IP addresses. The link query language already provides geolocation operations. Here's an IP address. Can you tell me what city or what country or what geographical latitude or longitude this particular IP address is located at? But I can't do that for private IP addresses because, well, private IP addresses can be used simultaneously in everywhere. But within my internal network, I know where a given private IP address is located. It is in this country, at this facility or this office. And I could just simply create a comma separated value with this IP address is in the United States, this IP address is in, etc., and upload that into the platform. That probably won't change that often. It's typically fairly static. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky if I don't want to have to list every IP address. Instead, I would want to list, say, by subnet. The 192.168.12 subnet is in the United States. 13 is in Japan, and so on. You could do that, certainly, but private IP addresses being fairly static, that's something that I could probably at least have some sort of script that would generate that data, and then I could upload it into the platform. This could even be automated using APIs that Devo exposes. But for very dynamic data, excuse me, like web server logs, then that's not probably going to be workable. So the platform provides a way that if you are ingesting the data from the web server into a table, we can turn that ingested data into a lookup table. And once it's in a lookup table form, the platform considers that data to be in a lookup table, then now I can use it to enrich my queries with data from a second source. And I'm sort of doing a side run around the limitation. You can only query one source at a time. This is one way that you can know I actually want to query two sources at a time, my firewall and my web server. You're still only querying the firewall, technically, and then you are invoking the lookup facility to pull data in from this lookup table that's actually populated by data from the web server that has been ingested right alongside the firewall. So let me demonstrate that just really quickly. Here I have data being ingested by a firewall. And I think we talked about this in an earlier deep dive, but I just want to touch on it a little bit. This particular table that I'm starting to select, firewall.all.traffic, has this little stacked disk icon that indicates that this is not a simple everyday table. It's something more magical. It's called a union table. A union table is another way to get around the only one table per query rule. What I can do is I can create a table that's one table, and that's what I'm going to query, but that table is actually populated by data from multiple source tables. So I'm taking data from this table and this table and this table and combining it all into one table. It's not a real table. I'm not ingesting data specifically into this table. But when I query this table, in the back end, my query is then actually pulling data from all of the parent tables, source tables of this union table. You can create union tables in the platform pretty simply. The platform ships with some union tables already created for you. And these union tables are generally scattered about the top level technology parts. So there's one under firewall.all, there's another one under web.all, there's another one under domain.all, and so on and so forth. And these are just pre-configured, pre-set up in the platform. And this particular one, firewall.all.traffic, is particularly useful because, if I could get, there we go, it is pretty much covering all of the firewallish stuff. So firewall dot, certainly, but also some other technology top-level tags that are firewall-ish. So that said, using union tables is another very common way of allowing a query to pull data from multiple source tables while still only technically querying one table, in this case, firewall.all.traffic. But I'm here to demonstrate the other way. So I'm going to go to perhaps domains.all, another union table. And so, okay, maybe in this scenario, I have a query that I'm going to be making against the firewall table, union table, but I want to include information from my DNS servers, internal resolving DNS name servers that my internal clients are configured to use to convert domain names, URL domains, for instance, into IP addresses. So those domain servers are getting these requests from clients, and they're logging what the client is asking for. And that can be fairly useful. So I'm going to take this DNS server table, in this case, again, it's a union table, and turn it into a lookup table. Now, I can do whatever sort of query filtering that I need to do here, filter out lines. And in fact, let me switch gears just a little bit and go to a table that maybe has a little bit more stuff that I can, there we go, more columns that I could filter on. So this is yet another union table of web server logs from various sources, Apache, Microsoft IIS, and so on. And so I have a very simple query, just pull the data from the table, but maybe I'm only interested in those lines of data where the status code that the web server is returning is a 400 or higher. And I talked about this in the last deep dive. 400 is an error, and it goes up to 500. 500 is also an error, just a different kind of error. I only want the lines where we're returning an error back to whoever it is who's talking to the web server. So I'm going to say I'm looking for those lines where this column has a value of 400 or greater. And I'm filtering everything else out. And any other filtering that I need to do, I could do in this query. But ultimately, what I want to do is create a new lookup. So here I am configuring what is going to appear as a lookup file as if it were comma-separated values. I need to give it a name. This is the name that I will use later on when I pull the data from the lookup table I'm going to create and use it in a query against, say, the firewall table. In the query against the firewall table, I'm going to say I want to create a new column. I want that column to contain the matching data where it's this IP address. That's the key column. That's what I'm matching on in this lookup table. And then retrieve some other column from the lookup table and put that column that I'm retrieving here in this firewall query output. So this name here is the name of the lookup table that I'm going to be using, referencing in other lookups against other data sources. So I'm going to call this, I suppose, web log errors. And I have a couple of choices. Do I want this to be a dynamic query or a static query? A static query is essentially I uploaded a comma separated value. I mean, I could take this current query output and save the data, just download it as comma separated values and open it in Excel, for instance, and do whatever massaging of the spreadsheet now that I want to do, delete columns, delete rows, what have you, and then take the resulting comma separated value file and upload it into the platform as a regular lookup table. That's essentially what a static query is here, only it saves me those intervening steps. What the static query will do is take the current output that I can scroll up and down here and save it as a lookup table. Now, I have to select what columns from this query that I want in the resulting lookup table. And so I suppose I want the event date of when this happened. And there we are. Definitely, I think I want the source IP. It kind of looks like in a key column to me. The method, is it a post or a get? The URL looks interesting. And then, of course, the status code. These are the columns that I want from this query output to appear in this lookup table that I'm going to create. I have to select the key column. This is what I'm going to match on. And source IP, I think, I will use. Talks about select a time range. Since I included a column with a essentially event date type in my lookup, and by the way, we're still going through and fixing this. There was a really bad vulnerability in the Confluence, which is a commercial wiki platform that Devo is using. The Confluence product had a really severe vulnerability that was being exploited. Threat actors out there were having a great time exploiting this. And the company, the vendor, they fixed it, but in doing so, they broke pretty much every URL in existence. So we're still kind of seeing that in the platform, where if you have a URL bookmarked into the Devo documentation, it probably is not working right now. And workarounds are being fixed, or being implemented. We're updating URLs, et cetera. But the big rush was to let's get the vulnerability fixed, because it was remotely exploitable and allowed arbitrary code execution, and that's never a good time. Anyway, so a time range lookup allows me to specify the time range from this lookup table that I want data from. I'm not going to do that right now. So I can create, and I'm going to go ahead and change this name to be static, a lookup table that has these columns from this query. Oh, sorry, yes. And since I have the event date, it's going to make me, I'm just take the event date out, simplify things. What I'm going to get is essentially as if I had downloaded this data, massaged it a little bit, and then uploaded it as a comma separated value. Now, in a lookup table, the key column must contain unique data, sort of like any database table. Whichever column you're going to index and match on has to have unique data in that column. So this query output, I could have, I'm using source IP here, I could have multiple occurrences of a given source IP. And in fact, there are several source IPs that are repeated again and again and again. In that case where the query output that I'm using to create this static lookup has repeated values, and what I'm going to use is the key column, it's the last value that is used. And the platform is going away and it's working on creating that new lookup table. There's a little bit of background stuff that has to happen. And when that background stuff has happened, then I'm going to get another transit notification that says, hey, the table is now available. If there's a query that has already been written, for instance, being used in an active board or something, that query is making use of the lookup table that I just created. Why would it be making use of the lookup table I just created? Maybe I had changed that lookup table and updated the content, or maybe I had deleted it and made a new lookup table the same name. That query is going to start failing because the data is not available while the background stuff is processing. If you make an update to an existing lookup table, queries that are hitting that lookup table don't fail. They get the old data until the update has been processed in the background. But if you delete it and then recreate it in that intervening time, then queries would fail. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to, create another query lookup. I forgot what I called this. So I'm going to call this Tim Demo Dynamic. This is going to be a dynamic query. So this dynamic query, again, I think I want to have the source IP and the method and the status code. The source IP is going to be the key column. And same thing, when I say save this, it's going in the background, creating a new lookup table. But the lookup table, if it's dynamic, is not a snapshot of the data that I was looking at when I created the lookup table. Instead, it is essentially a saved query. And then when I reference that dynamic lookup table, that causes the saved query to be re-executed as needed. So it's pulling current data from this query against this web.all.access table. With the static, you get a snapshot of the data that was there when the table was created. With dynamic, you get the latest data, and they both have their use cases. Now, if you have some query that, for instance, is being used in an active board and is being executed a lot, or if that query is part of an alert. And so the alert is being checked again and again and again to see, do I need to trigger and notify people? And that query uses a dynamic lookup table. The saved query for that dynamic lookup table does not have to be executed again and again and again and again and again and again and again. There is some caching that is done in the back end. So live data, with air quotes, the data may actually be from cached results that happened very recently. So not instantaneously ultimately the last updated data, but data from the query results that were done very recently ago. That's an important distinction I think that needs to be made. Not exactly the latest data, but cached. And then that's a trade-off for performance, of course. Every query is taking resources that the platform is set up with, and so it's a trade-off. Do we want the very last line of data, or do we want to maybe conserve performance? Caching conserves performance and is usually a perfectly acceptable trade-off. If it's not a perfectly acceptable trade-off, then maybe you don't want to create a dynamic lookup table. Instead, maybe you want to create a union table and approach the problem that way. Union table is another solution. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Greg, because I think we're coming up on the end of our time. So Greg, take us out.
All right, thank you very much, Tim. Now, in this Devo deep dive, we've been able to show you how to do lookups and correlations, using the CSV file as a lookup file that's been uploaded, as well as doing both static and dynamic static and dynamic lookups in this presentation. Sorry, I just tripped over my own tongue. And also, Tim mentioned the union tables, which was, a great little addition to the conversation, right? So I'd like all of you to take that information going forward and just give it a try inside your own platform. Go in and do a few different things. Again, a lot of what we do is going to be permission-based. So what you'll have access to will be dependent upon what roles you've been assigned inside of your organization. All right, so let's see. Trying to get to the correct slide. So we have some additional information that's available to you, and this is available on our Devo Docs site. Don't worry about trying to copy the links, because that would probably be a little bit too difficult to write all that down at this time. But if you go to docs.devo.com, on the main page there's a search box where you can find out additional information about the Devo platform. The specific topics that we recommend you look up on the main page of the Devo Docs site, one would be data enrichment. Another one would be uploading a lookup table. Another one would be creating a lookup table from a query. Another one would be adding lookup values to your query. Another one would be managing and editing lookup tables. And again, you can just go to the search box on the main page of docs.devo.com and type in your search string, and you will find a wealth of additional information about these lookups and how to make those correlations to enrich your data. All right, I want to thank all of you for attending this Devo deep dive. I also want to thank Tim Ramsey for his portion of the presentation, and I especially want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. Now, I'm looking in the Q&A window. It looks like all of the questions have been satisfied, so we are done for the day. And I want to thank you very much. The next Devo Deep Dive on the calendar will be next week, Thursday, June 16th, same time, session number 4. So if you are not signed up for that, and you are interested, please go ahead and do so. And we look forward to seeing you next week. If anyone has any additional questions, you can go ahead and put those in the Q&A window now. If not, we want to thank you all for your time, and we'll see you next week for another Devo Deep Dive. Thank you all for attending this webinar.